what an honor it is here to bring in a cat who actually was, in fairness, really not on my radar for quite a while, and then had an opportunity a couple winters ago to see Bruce Hornsby's band uh, when they came to the Fox Theater, and I was fascinated not just because of the double keyboard setup, but also just sort of the way that the songs were being interpreted by my guest and how he was adding colors and how he was adding, a lot of really beautiful feeling and different timbres to the music through a myriad of different keyboard instruments. And as I've done my research in preparation for this interview, it is pretty amazing to see him in so many different settings, especially back in the early part of his career, really in more of an art rock bag and a more of a kind of a fuck it throwdown rock bag with some shtick to it. And he, along the way, has continued to just develop and learn and stay humble. John J.T. Thomas, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Oh, thank you, Jake. It's an honor to be included in your heavy list of talented people. I appreciate even being considered in that category. So,
well, it's been you know what, I saw you that night, and I was just like, I have to. So it's gotten to this point, but I'm glad it was worth the wait. I just before we get into it, one guy that just flashed in my head, and I just kind of wanted you to talk about him because he does seem like he's a bridge to a new era. It's a guy you've had a chance to play with in Bruce's band, which is John Mylander. And I just
so you know John.
Well, John and I did a couple of great interviews, and I love the man. He's the sweetest cat, and he's one of the baddest dudes. So
completely, my opinion, completely.
So I want you to just talk about what the you know what it is. It's not about facility or chops or any of that. It's about essence. I just want you to talk about his soul, how you perceive what he brings to the band to raise the music to a higher level.
It's John Mylander?
Yes.
Well, when he first started playing with us, he was still in his 20s. It's probably been 3 or 4 years. He was not yet 30. And his innocence, his wide-eyed
yes,
ability to grasp what he was hearing and make sense of it without a whole lot of baggage to get in the way was really inspiring to me and encouraging, because I kind of try to live that way anyway, in spite of all the baggage I can't help but have acquired. So that's the first thing that I loved about him, just watching his process, the whirlwind, the sense he made of the whirlwind that was going on around him was just completely inspiring to me. And of course, he has such a lovable character, and seeing him approach that, just in my eyes, just made him all the more lovable.
Oh man, dude, JT, you're making my day. I mean, I want to be clear. I want to know. This is more of a philosophical thing, but I do want to ask you, because this is really important. Obviously, you're playing with a serious. I mean, the bass and drummer in that. I mean, there's a whirlwind of. It's a whirlwind of sonic energy and genius level stuff going on. But I want you to talk about, like, at a surface level, what does it mean? You've been on this earth quite a while. I'm 46. We all develop baggage over time, regardless.
Yes,
okay, habitual nature, whatever. But what do you mean, like, that? Can you talk about how baggage can get in the way of the musical conversation?
Well, the first thought that comes to mind is an old Zen saying that I'm very fond of. That is that in an expert's mind, few things are possible. In a beginner's mind, anything's possible. So,
dude, that is that's my line, dude. That's my line.
That's sort of been my mantra for a few years as I caught myself, kind of getting rigid.
A little stodgy. Yeah, I dig.
And in the course of all the many different kinds of gigs I do, I realize that when I sat down to play a song, I don't know, just something that I've played for 50 years, a standard or something, and I thought about, oh, I know how to play this, and I bring all that baggage to it. It can only really disappoint. And when I sit down, even with all that experience, if I can sit down and play it like it's the first time I ever played that song, then something really new and beautiful could happen. And I really live for that thing, that thing that's in me that can surprise myself even, and to play something I've never played before, or even make a mistake and expand my my vocabulary on something because I wouldn't have thought to do that, and I loved it when I did.
Well, you have been listening to the Jake Feinberg Show, because I want to ask you about the idea of hitting a clam. It could have been on the bandstand or some moment in the studio, or where you did hit a clam, and it turned out to be. I mean, David Spinoza, so many hit records. Right place, wrong time. You know, he's in the studio. They ask him to come in to do an overdub on the guitar. He overbent a string. He's like, let me do it again. And Arif Mardin and Dr. John are like, no, that's perfect. And that song becomes a hit. Same thing with Louis Shelton on Last Train to Clarksville. So I'm like, can you point?
Well, you're telling one of my favorite stories that I tell. I cannot believe you're saying this.
I love, we're already linked up spiritually, man. Go ahead, man.
The way it happened with me is I started singing this pattern to myself in sessions in the studio. I've always sort of had an imposter syndrome anyway. So when we listen to a playback, I mean, I'd be working with heavy cats like Lee Sklar or Tim Pierce, like the real serious guys.
Yeah.
We've been listening to a playback, and of course I'm thinking, well, if anything sounds funny, it's got to be me. It can't be these guys. So something go by, and then here's something funny, and I'd raise my hand and say, "That's me," and of course it wasn't. But the other thing is, I'd listen to a playback, and the producer would say, "This happened more times than I can count. Is there anything in there you'd like to fix?" And I say, "Yeah, that section right there, right, and the transition there. I got lost. I didn't know what I was going to do, and it's okay. Show us where." Roll to that place on the tape. This I will lay. Roll that place on the tape, and I pointed out, no, that's our favorite part of the tape. Fix anything else you want, but not that.
Wow.
And I realized what it was about. That it actually showed a human being like having a think quickly for himself, not knowing what to do, and what that person, in this case me, did in the face of not knowing what to do was far more interesting than anything someone would have done knowing the right thing.
Dude, I cannot believe you're This is so tripped out, because I'm flashing right now on my interview, and it's making all the more sense in the world, and it validates that Miles Davis was a Zen master, because when I interviewed McLaughlin, for the first time, he showed up in the studio in a silent way, and Miles goes up to him, and this goes back to what you talk about reinterpreting something completely differently than how you it goes. And he went up to John, and in his ear he said, "Play the guitar like you don't know how to play the guitar." And John's like, what the hell is he talking about?
What does that mean?
And he was so out of his normal thinking mind. And he was just like the way, I could not do justice to the poetry you just said, but it was so much more interesting what came out of him at that time, and it worked. It worked completely. Obviously, it's a seminal album, but it's like it's such a vulnerable, clearly something you're still working on. I mean, it's like the part that bothers you the most is the part that the people are like, no, that's the best part, man.
Well, it goes right along with, I don't know if you've heard this way of looking at life, but the people that annoy you the most are your greatest teachers.
Absolutely.
And it goes in that whole other area of everything is wrong, and the world is, whatever you think you've got it backwards. That, of course, that can turn into that's where the Dada art form came from, and even even the punchline in a joke is about because you expected this and do that. That's what makes it so powerful. And I think that is, for me, having played music for as long as I have, wanting to somehow make it relevant and as fresh and as meaningful as it has always been to me. I can't do it from the point of view as the learned expert. Then, or as Krishnamurti describes that mindset, he said, it's like trotting out a beautiful corpse. It might be beautiful, but it's not alive.
It's totally no pulse, no energy, no dynamics. It's dead.
No,
yeah, right.
So when I sit down to play, I tell myself, don't trot out any beautiful corpses.
Dude, I am, dude, Krishnamurti, man. I love that we're already into Krishnamurti at 11 minutes in, dude.
Yeah, he's some of his ideas really helped me get through my my artistic blocks about, I don't know what to do, and they taught me to ask the question, why do you want to know?
That's right.
Not how can I know, which is the question, how can I know? He taught me to ask, well, why do you want to know? Because I realized the reason I want to know is always to do something less with it, less than it could be. Not to face the terror of the unknown and the
yeah, that's right.
And to go into new territory. That's the only reason you ask that question.
That is so and so. Can you harken back to the mid '60s as to when you started to, for lack of a better word, like just drop into the void? And even though imposter syndrome. I mean, I don't know. I'm not a musician, I'm a journalist, so it's just a lot easier. I'm not in awe. I'm not comparing myself, but I know if I was a musician, that I would have imposter syndrome too. But these are like baby steps along the way. I just wonder if you could talk about a time early in your career when you really were vulnerable enough. Maybe you even fell on your face. I mean, the amount of time Denny Seiwell from Wings was in a Navy band in Chicago, and he got up on the bandstand at a black club on the South Side, and Lou Donaldson, who's still with us, and I think he's like 97 years old, and he's playing a shuffle, and he kicked Denny off the bandstand. He said, "You don't know how to, you don't know what you're doing," and but he said, "Come back when you do." And so that night was humbling, but Denny kind of shedded for a couple days, worked on his shuffle beat, and then he got back up, and he was okay. And the point is that
they actually let him back up.
Oh yeah, absolutely, and that's the point. Is like it was, and I so it could even be a time when you fell down, but actually being at the bottom of a pit was where realism was activated. Just some kind of story where you went into the infinite void and learned to, for lack of a better word, accept that, and it worked out okay. The point is that whatever it was, it turned out to be an amazingly powerful force in your career.
Well, I don't think I think I was blessed with such an overabundance of hubris.
Well, that's a good thing then. Yeah,
I was somehow protected from realizing how incomplete my.
Well, I mean, I don't know, man. I don't know about that, but yeah, go ahead.
Well, but I will say this: I had the great honor to work with Captain Beefheart early in my life.
Right.
I don't know if you knew that.
No, I'm always a little bit. I actually wouldn't mind if you did a deep dive on Beef because, to me, the stuff that I'm more familiar with Zappa was like, it seemed like more antics because Zappa was so out of control genius that we just lost Tom Fowler, the great bass player.
Yeah, I know.
And when I interviewed him 10 years ago, he was talking about the band, the particular band that he was in with Frank was his brother and George Duke, Jean-Luc Ponty. And like those guys, he said the one thing that Frank didn't like about the band is that they were too serious. They were too wonky, right?
Right.
And so Beefheart would run around the stage and hide. But to me, it gets like, it gets more to the point like where I'm like, was he really a musical cat? And I'm like, wow, JT played with him back earlier than that. So the floor is yours. I mean, tell me about Captain Beefheart, man.
I will. I grew up from age 13 or so. I grew up in the Antelope Valley, which is where their Beefheart and Zappa both went to school.
Right.
I even had some of Zappa's teachers were still teaching when I was in
Oh
school.
my God! This is insanity.
I pestered them mercilessly. So I was, what we called in that time a Zappa freak. So that was cool for me because it introduced me, to the music of Stravinsky and Marais and
right.
some other things that I wouldn't be so in love with my whole life if I hadn't been introduced at such a tender, open time. And through Frank, I discovered Beefheart's music. I was probably a huge fan from about 15 on.
Wow.
And mostly at the beginning, it was just sort of the outsideness of it. It's kind of record you'd play for someone, say, man, can you believe this guy did this? Or even better, like to end a party to get everyone to leave your house.
Yeah, it was so out, man. Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Minutes, But one day, I was probably 17 or 18, and I was listening to probably Trout Mask, or maybe it was Lick My Decals Off, Baby, the album. And by that point, I'd kind of gotten used to the odd aggression in his voice, and something about the paradigm started to become familiar, as opposed to just like goofy, jumbled, crazy.
Right, it was congealing a little bit, yeah.
And at that moment, and it may have been also influenced by a little bit of herbal.
Sure, no problem there, yeah.
But it dawned on me, this man is the only guy who's doing something new in rock music. Everything else is just a regurgitation of slightly changed of something else. This guy is actually changing it and putting something so fresh and so original in it. And, I guess that's the moment I sort of became a devotee in a certain way. And not to mention, and that's just his music. You go into his lyrics, and it is, he's like the Buckminster Fuller of music, of modern music. He just thought completely outside of the box, and his lyrics on surface sound like nonsense, but there's this thinnest thread of continuity that if you follow it, it's so enlightening. And I could go on.
No. I want to talk about this thin line of continuity because I'm not there, and I'm not a devotee, and I don't pretend to be. But I want you to explain what made him unique. I mean, this is the thing. You're talking. That's a huge statement to make. That outside of what he was doing was completely singular compared to what you said was everybody else was kind of doing their own thing, but it was comping something that came before. You're saying that nothing he did came before.
No, and later as I got to work with him and got to know him, I understood the reason for that.
Well, why don't you talk about that?
Well, so when I got to play in his band, all of his band members were from my hometown, were from Lancaster, where I grew up. So as I became about 19, 20, I became, it was a small town.
Right.
20,000 people, everybody knew everybody. And so I got the opportunity to meet and associate with like the best musicians around up there, and some of them were the guys from his band. And one in particular, Drumbo, or John French, his longtime drummer and transcriber.
Unreal.
So at the point in 1920, after he'd done a couple pretty lame albums, he was putting a new band together, and John French recommended me to him for that. And I'd met him a few times and just sort of, did the fanboy thing. But now here we are driving down to Frank Zappa's rehearsal studio from Lancaster every day.
What, on Sunset Boulevard?
Yeah.
Oh, my God. Dude, JT Thomas is losing his mind, dude.
At age 20.
Oh, my God.
And being a huge fan. I'm just thinking that, I just joined the Beatles, and my road was paved with gold from here on out. Wow. That's how immature I was. So we start doing that, and in the course of working on the record, I start to see behind the curtain, like how the stuff is really put together. Wow. And it's just so completely different than what I imagined.
Exactly. It's always that way.
So much random element in it, so much throwing stuff at the wall to see what sticks. He would, but that's sort of in the general overall, because, I had this fandom impression of him being this, this musical genius, the way all his music worked together. But I learned that a lot of that happened. He would whistle a part to one of the guitar players. He'd sing a part to me. He'd actually whistle a part to the drummer, and he'd whistle these phrases, and then leave us with him, and we had to kind of cobble them together and figure out how they work together. One might be like a 7-beat phrase. One might be a 15-beat phrase. One might be a 8-bar for 8-beat phrase. And we'd sit those and play those together to kind of make a soup out of it until like they all linked together, and maybe after 14 repetitions, it all came back to the beginning and we were all in sync again.
Unbelievable. That thin line of continuity you were talking about.
Yeah, and the randomness, frankly, as a young idealist, I was disappointed. It's sort of like my hero had been unmasked, and I saw sort of the
random. No, you just used the right word. Randomness.
The feat of clay of this, of what, when it's together and performed right, just has a genius, unpredictable. It's like the mistakes on tape I was talking about earlier. It's something that could not have happened any other way.
Dude, you're making my day. You're making my week for that. I mean, this is like, because you're really describing my show too. I mean, it's incredibly random, but
real life.
It's real, man. It's real.
You're just talking about the way reality.
But you know what's cool? I want to just step back for a second. Like, what was cool is that the reason it made it real, and this is just stepping back, I mean, he wasn't somebody who, he brought people into his band so that they could do what they could do. He wasn't a micromanager. He said, he gave you a theme, maybe through a whistle, and then he allowed your artistic integrity and creativity to take over, and eventually, so you guys wanted to be part of the mix. I mean, that's what makes it real.
That's where sort of being the cultist-like devotion was required.
That's right. Oh, okay. Yeah.
No kind of studied musician would let a guy whistle to you a part and then turn it into a hi-hat.
They would just quit on the spot or something, right?
They say, "What the fuck?"
Yeah.
What do you want me to do? And I also had I bought a Mini when I was 17 with some money that a friend of mine lent me. And so I was playing Mini Moog and Fender Rhodes. And
this is so insane. I need pictures of you back in that time playing Mini Moog, dude. That's so unreal.
Well, so another facet of Don's expression of musical direction. He would say things like, I'd say, "What kind of sound should I make for this song?" He said, "Give me the sound of the inside of a tooth." Another time.
Wait, I'm sorry. An inside of a tooth?
Yeah.
This dude was on same Zen master level as Miles, man.
Exactly. He was so. I would say, I've said this before, that if I ever met in my life one true genius, it was him, because he was not like other men. This is the most profound, without really being very hip at all to the canon of work that he put out, especially early stuff that really hooked you. It's profound to me to hear about this, for you to speak, for all the cats that you've played with and continue to play with, I always talk about it, and I oftentimes don't necessarily have perfect examples, maybe Dizzy or Miles or certain people like that, but
it's like, how are you going to cut above the morass of what everybody else is doing in your field? Whatever, musician, lawyer, broadcaster, how can you be singular? And what you've just been describing is that exact thing.
And to be totally total full disclosure, I don't think he knew any better. I don't think he could have done. He knew enough not to fuck with it and not to try, because he was not musically trained or skilled in any other way than being a huge expert and fan of like old Howlin' Wolf, Muddy Waters records, and being able to tell the difference of whether it was coming from the gut and the truth, or whether you were just.
Oh my God, this is on. Yeah, so he didn't know any because he couldn't.
He did bust our ass on that level completely. Remember, I watched him make one of the guitar players play a little 3-note phrase over and over for about an hour. You could call it abuse, but trying to instill in him the right essence of what it should feel like to play those 2 notes correctly. It was a little 3-note phrase. It just no, play it again.
Oh my gosh, relentless, dude.
Yeah, I cowered in the corner because I was afraid I would be next. But
well, no, this is really important. Again, part of this is that you were a fanboy in high school, and you were in your own way just learning to be a musician. But before I talked to you, I interviewed Roger Kellaway for the 3rd or 4th time, and
I love.
The dude was at Esleyan. He took on went head to head with Barbra Streisand. The dude is the biggest badass. And he's still here. It's unreal, and he's still.
I only know him through his piano playing, but man, some of those things I heard when I was young just sounded like the real. Sounded like he had muscles like Andre the Giant.
Andre the Giant. So it's so funny we're talking about Beefheart, because he did this album that we were talking about, Roger did, with the Singers Unlimited, which was, Gene Purling from the Hi-Lows. And Roger's group was this insane. You want to talk about Andre the Giant? You're talking about the monsters of odd time signatures. It was Emil Richards, Joe Porcaro, My Dear Uncles, Soul Uncles, Chuck DeMonico, Ed Lustgarten, and Roger Kellaway. And the point is, what I'm getting at is this is tunes like Zippity Doo-Dah in like 33/16. This is like Odd Times with these singers. It's so psychedelic and it's so hip. The problem is, again, they were already, Gene Purling already was a well-known institution. Roger was as well. But when they went to A&M, they were like, this is awesome, and it's such a psychedelic album. It's an incredible album. And they're doing Honeysuckle Rose, Odd Times. It's insane. And yet they're like, it's called Just in Time.
Can I find it on?
I'm curious. You're gonna have to, just type in Singers Unlimited. You're gonna lose your mind. But the point is that when they went to A&M, Herb Albert, who let them do it, he goes, they're like, this is great, but we don't know what to do with it.
What are we gonna do with it?
What the hell? And so I guess the thing I wanted to ask you is that. Did Beefheart because here's the point. It was in today's world, we were talking about this, with this kind of abstract album, I don't even know if it would have gotten off the ground, because the bean counters would have been like, no, it's not going to sell. They still released this album, and part of it was just on the back of the reputations of the guys that were
right.
And there's another famous guy that there's a whole freaking compilation of stuff that the Singers Unlimited did. But the point is that did Beefheart, did he really, was his stuff was not radio friendly? I'm trying to figure out, was he riding the coattail? Did he really ride as commercial? Zappa's genius was so many things, but he also combined a lot of pop elements in his music, which made it commercial.
And he knew how to tailor.
He did.
He could tailor his music. Don basically, was you know, you got guys like Salvador Dali,
Right.
who could paint a photograph. I mean, their technical skills so amazing that he could have been amazing if he just painted it with his photographic accuracy.
Right.
But of course, he took it and made the most bizarre shit that you can imagine with it. John had that side of it, but not the other side of it. Don could not play the same thing once, much less twice.
Right.
And I also some of this maybe can stay just between you and I.
Well, if you want me to pause it, I mean, listen. You know what? Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to send you an audio file of this, and then if you want me to edit some stuff out before it goes out, let me know.
Okay. Well, I'll just say this. This next thing I said probably just between you and I.
You got it.
Like one of the things that, of course, just disappointed fanboy in me was also we would do these. We were rehearsing these tunes, and there would be at times in the rehearsal where it all came together. I was just in fucking heaven, you know, with what it was, and imagining what the record was going to be. And then we went in the studio and cut the tracks, and Don could never even come in when he's overdubbing his vocals. Could never even come in the same place. You know, so there was the downside of it being out of his control and needing the random gods of random nature to bless it with this genius. You know?
Right. That's very disheartening for someone like you who could.
Yeah.
You know, that's something that I didn't think about a lot. Beefheart now is bringing it to the forefront. The idea of, you know, someone like Mark Murphy or great vocalists who, you know, you'd be in rehearsal and you get so excited because, you know, you'd be doing a version of Red Clay, you know, or something crazy with vocals, and you could go into the studio and know that he could come close or even nail it exactly the same way. Not Captain Beefheart, though.
So, well, it made me realize that the things that Beefheart and us really, although I was too young to know it, were rehearsing, was more the primal essence of what it would be, and not trying to taper off the edges.
Exactly, dude. This is so Jake Feinberg, dude. I am loving this, dude. I mean, it must have been a little bit maddening for you though, because ultimately, I mean, is it? You know, I remember going back to my dear Uncle Emil Richards, soul brother. He'd be on some soundtrack date with a huge percussion section, and he'd be playing a balafone or vibes or whatever, and you know, they'd kill it, 67-piece orchestra, and he'd be like, "I'm sorry, I made a mistake. We got to do it again." And because he had to listen to himself, he's the one that had to listen to the record. And I just wonder, is it hard sometimes to listen back to stuff that you remember how visceral, how primordial, how raw and good it was, and in the rehearsal, and then it just does not translate to you or anybody for that matter on record?
Well, that's definitely the story with that record.
Yeah.
Although I can listen to it with a little bit of distance and appreciate it. Partially, in fact, that it wasn't released until 35 years after we recorded it.
Yeah, that helps, though. That helps.
That shape puller, yeah. But
Yeah.
But I think the real essence, at least my understanding of it, is I was so young and maybe needy, and in my sense, I was building my future career off how good this record was going to be.
That's right.
I had a whole other childish program going on in my head that, you know, I wanted it to be great, not only because it was Dawn and I just loved everything about it, but I also wanted to be great for me, you know. And
a springboard of sorts,
realized,
yeah.
I just realized for my use of it, whatever that would be, and I realized sort of how out of place and unattainable that and why that should have been disappointed in was, you know, that request, that ask.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, part of that's just being, for lack of a better word, young and dumb, or you know,
growing up.
Yeah, exactly. You know, but I mean, so just going back for a few things though. I mean, you guys were able to. There was a domestic touring circuit for Beefheart alone, or was he always sort of attaching himself to a larger act? I'm trying to get the idea of like the commercial. I mean, how you guys sang for your supper, and and I'm, that kind of viability. That because if he couldn't, I guess my question is, like the Grateful Dead, they never played the same song the same way once, but they could play ballads to 20,000 people, and you could hear a pin drop, And if Beefheart couldn't replicate anything, then I'm just I'm curious how he actually made money. Like if you guys were able to actually go on the road.
Well, I think in time he probably improved that skill because I've seen some live. I think once a record was made, he was able to listen to that and then learn it.
Right.
Right. Himself. But he wasn't approaching the rehearsals that way at all. And it was just a matter, if you guys get it right, then I'm going to come in and put the cherry on top. And that was as far as it went, as far as his joining us in any technical responsibility for how it was put together, I think he was a creature of inspiration, and it was like, I'll just feel when to start singing, and I'll know when that section ended and the next verse begins. But there was no studying it on. We of course as a band had to break it into those kind of manageable compartments in order just to do it more than once.
Right, exactly, just to hold it together.
But his role was now to come and kind of ride roughshod over that and be brilliant. And and from listening to a lot of his records, that's what he did. But now, of course, I heard every one of his records differently after that experience, and I heard sort of the serendipity in how some of the records I loved so much, how the timing worked out. That I was, that's so brilliant. But I also realized I was just fortunate and I was lucky, the way the records that I had studied and admired of his, the way the vocal fit with the way this word came in that spot, or this chord change right under this. I realized some of that was just it was luck,
Oh, I love it, but I mean, it's so fascinating because I don't know, man. I'm really glad that we did this chunk of the interview. It's really important because I have to keep. I'm really one of those cats that, I mean, I would have already been in bed anyway, but if I was somehow straggling around late at night, you put on a Beefheart record, I'm definitely leaving the party. That's, part of me has that sort of reaction to it. And so to talk to somebody like you, and I probably still need more guidance, but it's just very, I wanted to ask you about a couple of things. I mean, where were you, when did you first, I don't want to say this, when were you in high school?
I graduated in 71.
In 71?
So I was supposed to graduate in 72, but I was one of those kids that went to extra period.
Yeah, you were reading Krishnamurti. You were pretty, you were good, man. I dig that. I dig.
I was a nerd. I was completely nerded.
Were you like, were you hip? I mean, part of me also like wonders. I mean, I was born in 78, so all the music I love is really from that incredible pocket of time when J.T. Thomas was a burgeoning adult, when you had, you had Chick Corea, and you had McCoy Tyner, and you had Jan Hammer, and you had Joe Zawinul. And I'm like, you know what, Jake? I don't even know if I would have been hip enough to know that shit was even going down. And I just wondered, not that you were a fusion freak, but from a jazz perspective, what was your exposure? You did say you had a mini moog, because that stuff was like, I mean, some people would say the first fusion music. Phil Wood said this to me: Chano Pozo and Dizzy Gillespie, 1945. I dig that, right? Yeah. But then when you talk about the electronic music or just that fusing, it was right there for you. And I'm just wondering, like. And then there were also like, it was like, again, these guys were older than you, but it was Gary Barone and Ed Green and Johnny Morell, and these guys were cooking jazz. There was so much insane stuff going on, and maybe you were just cooking in a garage band in high school. But I'd love you to know your jazz sort of the exposure you had to it outside of even just the records?
Well, being a piano player gave me sort of an existence completely outside of the popular rock music world.
Right.
Right. So while during my high school years I was a big Zappa freak, but I also I love the Beatles. Let's say
sure, absolutely.
The Beatles at age 8. So the vocals and the songwriting, and then there's being coming of age during the 10 years that they basically transformed what modern recording technology was.
Right.
Had a huge effect on me. It helped me become an engineer. Made me want to know about how to make records, about that whole other element to it. But during all this time, there's this other kid who loves to sit by himself and play stride piano and boogie woogie.
Oh, man, dude. Yeah.
I was probably 16 when I first heard Art Tatum and thought, I just about gave up playing. I thought, why should I bother? This guy's already done everything. But, I was definitely checking out, my favorite in the earliest, what I call my pre-jazz awareness were guys like Errol Garner.
Sure.
Johnny Guarneri. I don't know if you know about
Oh,
him.
my, yeah. I've seen his, I'm not that hip to his, like Bud Powell.
Yeah, not Bud so much.
Bud was so esoteric. I mean, the Bud was...
Yeah.
I mean, I listened...
And Bill Evans were both too sophisticated for me.
They were too sophisticated. Okay, I'm just trying to figure out where your pulse was. I love where you're... So you were doing like Willie the Lion Smith a little bit? Kind of like... Yeah.
And Albert Ammons.
Yeah, I dig.
And Benux Lewis.
Yeah.
Dr. John, of course, was a huge bridge for me because he's kind of siphoned all of that into his world. I mean, this guy, Johnny Guarneri, he used to play... Do you live in L.A.?
I live in Tucson, but no. I would love to know. Would he play? Where was he playing? The Renaissance?
There was on Ventura Boulevard, down near Coldwater. There was a well-known. It was a restaurant, but had a lounge, a bar called the Tail of the Cock, and Johnny Guarneri was there. It was the house pianist.
Oh my God, that is insane!
And I'd read about him. I don't know, in Downbeat. I was the nerd who went into the high school library and
some would say you were the hippest cat, not the nerd, but in
a way. Well, the hip in the nerd way, or nerd way. So I knew about. So I actually snuck in down there. I went down when I got my driver's license. I was probably 17 or 18, and went in and snuck into the bar there and tried to look as old in the corner in the darkness. Just to hear Johnny Guarneri play, because he would do stride in odd times. He'd do like T for 2 and 5.
Oh, I love this. I love this. Yeah.
There was no. He was in kind of the Zappa-ish way. He was having fun with it. He wasn't trying to be all heavy and shit. He was just saying, "Look what I can do," and almost for a laugh.
I mean, he was beyond genius. Again, you've just been around. To me, I mean, Zappa, I have a huge amount of respect for him in the sense that, like, the dude was a complete avatar musically, and yet all he wanted to do was fuck around. And that's the greatest
I'm still trying to absorb the joy of that condition,
That's what I'm saying. I like where, because you have it's endearing, but you have a self-deprecating vibe sometimes where and I just wonder, like, if you can talk about, like, especially working with Bruce, or even, where you learn to say, hey, you know what, like, my rudiments are there. I know what my limitations are. How about happiness is, I remember Marty Ballin from Jefferson Airplane told me, he's like, happiness is our divine right. And, and really just, like, can you talk about you're getting to that point of not being so heavy, I see so many of my peers, they are very serious. They take the music very seriously, and they take themselves that seriously. And I look at my favorite artists are the ones who, they take what they do very seriously, but they don't take themselves that seriously.
Well, this is not so much about my musical self, but more just my human personality. But I was one of those kids, like, I I did first grade and second grade in the same year. I skipped grade.
Oh man.
Was always in the top 3 of my class, and I was from a big family, and I was one of the older kids, and I remember as a young kid, the sort of preteen enlightenment you come to. I remember wishing above all else that I could be normal, that I could be like other people. I didn't like being. Also, because you skip grades, you advance. You're in a group of kids who are older. They're more mature. They're more emotionally mature. They're bigger.
I totally no. It's not an enviable position. No.
Yeah. So I find myself, some of my lifelong struggle with self-deprecation comes from this childhood desire to just be like everybody else and not be so special.
It's amazing how that stays with you. It then never leaves, too. It's weird.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But and then the other side of it is I was coming from this big family, like 10 kids, and I kind of felt like at a certain point I was the golden child. I was the musician. Every time we had guests, my mom would say, "Johnny, come out and play the piano for our guests." And I kind of felt like I grew up with this attitude that I have to achieve, not just for me, but for all my family, because the younger brothers, sisters sacrificed so that I could achieve. Either one of those kind of psychologies that I think I've had to work with to kind of find peace in my limitations,
No, I think that's really well put. I mean, where do you, I mean, like, even including your ego, I'm curious about why Bruce brought you in the band. I mean, the truth is that, he's another one of these guys who is, it's just super high level of intelligence, but just also wanting to have fun, like never wanting to take anything too seriously, still being human. And I just wonder about, but he doesn't just put people in the band for the sake of being nice. I mean, he's putting, yeah.
No, he doesn't. And I'm going to tell you the unvarnished truth, okay?
Please.
So I met Bruce a few times. I was working with in my early 20s. I had some friends who knew some friends, and I'd also started getting my studio chops together. And I was introduced to Lenny Waronker's wife, whose stage name was Donna Lawrence. She had been a Dr. Pepper girl. She was a singer-songwriter. She had made records. She wanted to keep making records, but so here I am producing. Here I am at like 26, producing sessions with these cats. She even flew me to Nashville at one time. We cut with what's the guy's name? Jimmy Bowen.
Oh.
And
what?
So yeah, and I was so green. Oh God, it's embarrassing to think about how green I was. But she had all this connection to power, and of course, kind of under the radar because all these people wanted to help her, but also I think it was well known that Lenny didn't want anything to come of it.
Now, how did that work though? So he would placate her by giving her studio.
I give her the budget.
Yeah, exactly. But it was not. He was not going to go full bore into promotion or anything like that.
No, he was not involved at all.
Yeah, right.
He basically just looked the other way.
I just want to be clear though. You said Jerry Sheff, Burton. Who would play drums? Earl Palmer or
Ronnie.
Ronnie Tutt, man.
Ronnie Tutt.
Oh
yeah.
my God, my hero. No, dude, I got to send you my. That's still to this day maybe my favorite interview I ever did.
The first time I ever saw a Lynn drum in a studio, and it was Ronnie had it.
I know.
And this was.
Are you kidding me? This was like that must have been like 70. When was that?
I don't know. I was in my early 20s, so late 70s, probably late 70s.
Oh my God!
But Ronnie Tutt said, "Yeah, these things are going to put us out of work." So I figured I better learn how to program.
Oh my!
So he started bringing him with his card, and he had Lynn drum. set up there at his drum kit.
Dude, I just love that J.T. Thomas was cooking the groove with Jerry Sheff and Ronnie Tutt, man. That to me that made my day.
And James, I became pretty close with James Merton and his son Jeff, who's now been passed. But Jim told me that James told me that Jeff was trying to put a home studio together. So I got with him and helped him buy some gear and wire it all up, and of course played on his sessions at his garage too.
Wow. So then somehow this ties into to Bruce.
Okay. Yeah. So one day I was at Donna's house, and Donna said, I had a songwriter who's sitting at the cassette, because Donna was looking for songs to sing. Well, somehow she'd gotten a cassette of some of Bruce's songwriting. This is before the range.
Way before.
When Bruce was just trying to get known in
LA.
Oh
my God, this is insane.
So we listened to a couple of songs on the cassette, and we actually recorded one. So it's a song that ended up on Bruce's first record, The River Runs Low Tonight. And Don and I would just we did some of these recordings, just piano and her.
Sure.
Just me and her. And I remember Bruce later said, yeah, you're the only guy that ever got the cover of one of my songs, got the piano part right.
Wow. Because he was this is because when I interviewed him, I'm pretty sure this was probably like maybe the early 80s. He was out in LA doing he was trying to get going. That's when this
deal.
Yeah.
That's where he put the range together too during that time.
That's right. Right. Okay.
But I think it was a little prior to that. But during this period when she'd gotten that cassette, she asked Bruce to come meet her at her house and play some of the songs, just play for him.
Wow.
For her. Just and of course I was there too. And so I met Bruce as a songwriter, and he played a few songs. And Bruce's recollection of it, just because humility is not really in his skill set. He's a jock. No, don't broadcast that.
No, I'm going to send you. We'll let it. Don't worry about it. No, the point is that
I think you'll know what.
Yeah.
But okay, if you want to give me first right of refusal, but he remembers that Donna Lauren paid me to have lunch with her. That's what he said.
Give me a break, dude. Give me a break. Like, dude, you've been working with her for a long time before that, man.
Yeah, but so that's where I first met Bruce. Okay, a few years down the road. But my next experience with Bruce, he called me. He was touring as a band leader for Sheena East.
Wow.
And they'd lost the second keyboard player. And Bruce called me and asked me if I'd want to come on the audition. So I remember I stayed up all night learning the 4 songs. One of them was that song, Almost Over You. It had a really elaborate string arrangement to it. I stayed up all night, drove from my house in Palmdale down there to his house, his garage in Van Nuys, to the audition. I found out that I'd learned the one song in the wrong key, because it was one of those they'd sped it in between the key,
right?
And I guessed D, and it was actually D flat. So I had to sight read the chart I'd written on it and transpose at the same time. So it was a rough, and I was fucking tired. It was a rough audition, but nonetheless, Bruce said that I did the best audition of all the guys who auditioned, and that Sheena liked me the best. But oh God, here I go. Bruce had a friend who was just out of college, and is married. His wife was about to have a baby, and Bruce wanted to give him the gig because he knew he needed the money. So Bruce told Sheena, no, we think this guy's better than JT. And that wasn't JT, that was just Joe Thomas. So Bruce kind of fucked me out of the gig. Do that tour, which is,
dude, honestly, I'm really, you know what it is? So, okay, so how many years after the session when he drove up to that lady's house, how much time had passed with the Sheena Easton gig? How many years?
Probably about 3 years.
Okay. So he then he does something nice for a friend who didn't cut it the way JT cut it.
Right.
Right.
And I never knew. I just figured.
That's fine. It's always like, when did Fortune smile? And then yeah.
So those are my two, my two acquaintances with Bruce. Yeah, it's just sort of as a musician, as a working class stiff before he was a.
He knew the truth is that he knew right from the get-go, even with his jocularity, he knew JT Thomas was not to be fucked. He was a real deal.
Well, he had heard. At that time, I was working with Sparks,
right?
And so his reputation that he'd heard about me was from Sparks. This guy from Sparks. So that was the recommendation that got me into the audition. He didn't maybe connect me with Donna. That's why.
Right.
But that's what he knew me as there. And so come about 5 years. This is probably 1989. I'm touring with Don Henley as a keyboard tech on his Building the Perfect Beast tour.
Right.
I won't go through the whole story about how I ended up doing that, but a friend of mine was the keyboard tech. He got deathly sick with spinal meningitis. During their production rehearsals, they were leaving on the road in like 3 weeks, and they had all this brand new technology, the Akai samplers. They're triggering backup.
Yeah, all the MIDI stuff. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, all the MIDI stuff. Yeah. So he called me and said, "Look, I know because I was one of the few guys who was a very skilled engineer, but also a musician. Usually musicians don't make good engineers."
I dig, man. No, that's cool. No, yeah. Musicians. By the way, we're definitely doing a set too, by the way. We are not even close to being done.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I got all that. I saved all afternoon for you.
No, what I'm saying is, what I'm saying is, we can circle back to plenty of yeah.
Oh, okay. Good thing.
But so this cat got really sick. So
this cat got really sick. And basically, he's sick enough that his doctor told him that if he didn't go and get in bed right now, he could die. So he calls me on a Sunday night before Monday morning rehearsal. Don Henley's in this big sound stage in North Hollywood. We're doing their final production rehearsal. That means with the lighting rig, with the sets, all the gear, back upstairs, everybody. And starting Monday morning, he said, "God, if you could just go in there and cover for me." He maybe thought he was going to get better.
Right.
It didn't happen that way. But he didn't want to leave a black mark. He didn't want to just not show up, but he couldn't even go and say, "I can't be there." Anyway, so I went, and I've been playing around town these gigs for like, $100 a night, which is, I was working at the Hyatt on Sunset, that they call the Riot House.
I mean, and back in that day, they're still paying cats $100 a night.
Yeah, no, I was making as much money around town as you could, without being in some glitzy hotel or something.
That's right.
And working in the studio with Sparks all day, and still to take this gig as the keyboard tech on this Don Henley tour was like triple the income that I was making. Wow. And I had a family. And I'm thinking, I should just do it. Once I'm thinking, and I'm going from being a keyboard player to setting up someone else's gear. In my young mind, I was probably in the early 30s, I'm thinking, this is the end of it. I'll be setting someone else's gear up my whole life. And
it's good bread. Whatever. I can support my kids.
But for my family, I can take this money home.
Yeah.
So I went and started that tour with absolutely no experience. I was the greenest keyboard. I didn't even know I had to load the truck after the first show. That's what the green. But the guys liked me, and they took me in the wing.
Sure.
So I did this tour with Don, and within about a month, the two keyboard players in the band, they both knew I played. And, I would play it sometimes in the warm-up jam before Don got there with the band. And one of the keyboard players even said, "Man, I really feel bad that a player like you is, like, pulling my cable for me."
I freaking love this, dude. Don't even tell me that they stepped aside for JT Thomas.
No, they didn't do that. But there were some parts that were like triggering samples. They were using this is all okay to say now.
Yeah.
They're using that was the record that had In a New York Minute. They had these beautiful backup vocals that Take Six had done, and I had those on samples. So the backup singers were singing that, but I was also triggering the samples to reinforce it. And there was a very this is 1989, so it was probably pretty close to the Milli Vanilli era.
Right.
So the strict rule was I was not allowed to play any of those samples if there was if the band was on stage playing the song. So I even had to test them on headphones because Don did not want someone walking in the arena hearing that the Take Six was being played on a machine. And they also had the saxophone solo that Wayne Shorter did
on Asia.
What song? Into the Innocence.
I didn't know that. I didn't know.
Yeah, there's on Don's version of Into the Innocence. Bruce produced that, by the way. But that's his song.
Holy, totally.
We've taken the guitar, the sax solo, broken it up into phrases, and then the main keyboard player, Scott Plunkett, would play it with a breath controller and would play it on the keyboard, note by note. But he was triggering the actual licks and sounds that Wayne Shorter had played. So you get the exact solo from the record.
Oh my God! I love this.
So that was some very tricky tech for 1989, and it was so unknown that we had a duplicate rack of a complete in case the one went down. In about 30 seconds, I could plug a snake into the next one. So we had everything running in duplicate like the military would, fail-safe. So that it was that important to the show. Anyway, so that was my role as I was / keyboard tech, but I was playing parts from behind the racks. I was more than a keyboard tech, but that was my job. So fast forward a year, that next year, Into the Innocence was nominated for Record of the Year for Grammy. Bruce Hornsby and Don agrees to sit in with Don at the Grammy performance at the Grammys that year.
Wow.
And Bruce is coming there to do the rehearsal, and he sees me there. And first thing he says is, JT, or John Thomas, John, keyboard playing gigs must be really hard to get if you're out here teching for Don. And the way Bruce is, that could have been a joke and also a little bit of a slight. Like I said, he's got that jock.
He's got that jock, man. But the best way to this is so okay, go ahead. By the way, listen, my recorder.
We knew each other at that moment, okay?
Right.
And then after that show, we were hanging out a little bit afterwards, and Bruce said to me, he said, "Hey, can you tune a piano?" And I lied through my teeth. I said, yeah. He said, well, great. I need somebody who could do what you do. I need a guy to play in the band, but also to tune my piano for me on our tour next year. Would you do it? And of course, I said yes. Then for the rest of that tour, for the next 3 months with him, we were traveling with a Yamaha Baby Grand, but hiring local tuners because I'd never touched the piano tuning. I didn't know. So for a month, I'd sit with the local tuners and ask them questions about it. Then the next month, I started tuning it myself. So I had about 2 months of actual piano tuning experience by the time my tour with Bruce started, and I went on the tour as his /piano tuner / keyboard player. So the answer to how I got into Bruce's band is really something that rarely happens, is through the back door.
I have literally 40 seconds left on my recorder, and I cannot believe you weaved that story. That was the sickest, unvarnished version of your connection with, and you're telling me, right before we'll do set 2, but you're telling me that was 1990?
1989.
And you've been you have never looked back.
Never looked back. And then I've got more to go, but yes, I never looked back. No, and